The New Zealand period of colonial rule was marked by disaster, with one of the most significant losses of life that the Pacific has known. The crisis point of this early New Zealand governance came with the notorious Spanish influenza epidemic of 1918, with the Talune, the ship of death. In a bureaucratic bungle, the ship was allowed unquarantined into Apia Harbour, knowing that it contained a deadly flu virus. That led to the death of 20% of the population, one of the most devastating global events of that decade.
Yeah. Ora nga wenga nga fai. I sa funga fanga ngari. Ana nga sio kinga. Kokel. Nga maliwale kama ro kinga. Maro kama ele yani kanga kasaka ngua fangua. Aso nga len kavale. Nga meu kavale se fangua. Oso nga fa ma e o aku le kavale se fangua ma se choro kanga kawa o kanga kawa mama I uma ia kasi ase se rua kongi uma ia kanga kanga la kasi alfa de fangua kinga la uma ku ia kanga ka nga uko vai mea ia fa penga foi se voi o isi ai fa nga me fo yesa sa kang wa ya fa yo ka mai fa I ave kang ilua ya o kira kang ka le se e dia ya wa nga fi ya sia po mal fara ka ai le impusa e o au mai me o la pa I sami nga u fi ya ile o ngai ka le so nga le ni apa Pepe awa kele roe ke ya wa mai ke ya wa ngi va ka oko ele fa pepe yo ga so ge a kinga le me wo ko fa ro ku kin ya ke ya wo fa ngi va ke ya wa uma ku ele se fi wa a fi nga fe ka ngi sima ma le fe lo ele fe wa kan Kani maya le si maka oko le ronga moenga ai ala o ko so aku ele se me nga ava ya si apo sai ava e male fara de di ke le ko fu fie ia nga ngo lo le maya sai ai ave kongi le dua o lo kamanga nga o kilo kama o fe lo le fa ma Wa olea nga o kiro kamai oi I fangori ai ave le va ai la kangu ya vao wa vao ai nga ro kama
The ones who die tend to be either very young or very old. And very old in the Samoan context means the leaders. So the houses of advisors, I think there's something like 80% of them die. So imagine if 80% of our members of parliament die. That's what Samoa saw. And so that meant that many of these men who may have been inclined to follow certain channels are replaced by much younger, and they are still men at this point. And so you get a new vision about how things might work, and you get a new sense of what might be possible. And this leads to the kind of second mau. Every family had buried dozens of their own people to not understand the suffering, the emotional suffering of Samoan people was like, it was the last straw for many Samoans. You know, this kind of thing, when it's combined with a great tragedy, is going to breed discontent.
This growing discontent ignited the second wave of the Mawapule, the Samoan movement for independence, under the motto Samoa mo Samoa, Samoa for Samoans.
I think one of the things the Mao does is it crystallises a Samoan unity, right, that had been fractured by the empires, 50 years before, where they'd set Samoan against Samoan, and Samoans had mobilised themselves in their family or district or village's own interests. But the Mao galvanises Samoans to a common purpose. And even by the time we get to the 1940s, even the parts of Samoa which were not sort of on board had started to be in that conversation.
In 1929, Samoans march in passive resistance to celebrate the return of banished leaders. A skirmish breaks out, killing a New Zealand policeman. Then heavily armed New Zealand police open fire on the crowd, killing 11 Samoans, including Mao leader Tupuotu Masese Lealofi III. That day is remembered as Black Saturday.
I think after that, it was a point of reflection for both governments. The Mao fled because they had learnt that the New Zealand government was prepared to kill people. Something Samoans never forgot right through to independence. There was always this possibility that gunboats could come and arm police. And this is what the history of New Zealand teaches us as well. And then the New Zealand government also realised this was not working. But their answer was the wrong one. They sort of basically stripped the administrator of some of their powers and tried to govern Samoa from Wellington, basically by remote control and without any firm commitment to improving the lot of Samoa.
But liberty was still a long time coming. At 101, Mele Yoelu still has vivid childhood memories of the struggle of the Mao.
Me ka wo kong me ole la au ole ifislele e nga e fo me ni fo o ki fo nga fa Samoa la au nga pe ni pang e o me ka wa nga Samoa la ko e ka ale e le ni la ko fa nga wa o me palang.
We're polished steel because we're tested by fire. We thank God that we went through this struggle. We learned a lot about struggles, but most importantly, we learned a lot about ourselves.
Changing times came with the New Zealand Labour government in 1935, who supported the Mao and repealed the exile of one of the leaders, Taisi Nelson. In accordance with global changes after World War II, New Zealand and the United Nations helped Samoa to prepare for self-government. It would be the first Pacific island to achieve independence.
New Zealand had not prepared Samoa properly for self-government. They deliberately obstructed Samoan efforts to get jobs in the public service. They'd made sure that Samoans could not really access higher education, so there were no accountants and lawyers, or very few, who could take over the job. So in 1947, when this is laid out, we're looking at a period where New Zealand is going to have to make up for all that history of neglect and deliberate obstruction of Samoan political ambitions. And then they have the other problem that the Samoan economy had barely grown in 30 years of New Zealand rule. And so the Samoans have to sort of set their nose to the grindstone and nut out all sorts of things that aren't heroic, like marching, but are absolutely necessary. What's the tax policy going to be? What kind of banking system will an independent nation have that's not dependent on New Zealand? What kind of who gets the jobs in the public service? Who gets the scholarships? Who's going to run the health department? And the fact that Samoans actually get together and make this happen is one of the great achievements of modern Samoa. Only 50 years before, Samoans had been at each other's throats, shooting at each other. And now we see them working together with a common purpose, and that alofa that we celebrate in Samoa that actually provides for a stable Samoa. One of the things that I think hasn't been appreciated enough is that moment where Samoans really set themselves to work to build a country. And often hard work, that tautua that Samoans commit themselves to between 1947 and 1962. That's my grandfather and grandmother you know, putting aside these older grievances against other Samoans, putting aside all the other issues they might have, and putting Samoa first as this commitment, this alofa to the nation. This is something I think we can all be proud of, and we can acknowledge at this moment that without that hard work, which doesn't always get, you know, the laurels, and they may not all be famous, but they did it.
For the last time, the two trusteeship flags are lowered, one by the Prime Minister of New Zealand and the other by the Honourable Mataafa Fiame, Prime Minister of Western Samoa.
This is a celebration of Samoa. Samoa people, Samoan mythology, Samoan history, Samoan values, the vision, the things that we hold in common that speaks to us. This is a celebration of soul, of a people, and the values that they want to pass on, you know, to the next generation.
Slowly and surely, in a moment of deep emotion, the heads of state raise the emblem of Western Samoa to the masthead, where, like the flag of many another new independent state, it demonstrates with dignity the fulfillment of a people's wish.